It is called the most influential forgery in modern history. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a short book that claims to be the secret minutes of a plan for world domination. It is a fabrication. That much has been proven in a court of law and traced, document by document, to the people who built it. This is not a debate about whether the protocols are real. They are not. This is the story of how the lie was assembled, who assembled it, and how it traveled from a Paris satire to the desk of Adolf Hitler. 7 parts, 1 thread. Here is the whole of it. It begins with a book that has nothing to do with Jewish people at all. In 1864, a French lawyer named Maurice Joly published anonymously and abroad a satire called The Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. It was printed in Brussels and smuggled into France because its real target was the Emperor Napoleon III and his appetite for absolute power. Joly was caught and jailed for 15 months. He never mentioned a Jewish conspiracy. He died in 1878 by his own hand. Decades later, forgers would take his words, whole passages of them, and rebuild them into the protocols. When the fraud was finally exposed, it was Joly's own book, laid side by side, that gave the game away. The dramatic scene, The Secret Midnight Council, came from a novel. In 1868, a German writer named Hermann Goedsche published a sensational book called Biarritz under a false English name, Sir John Ratcliffe. Goedsche was, on the public record, a convicted forger, dismissed from the Prussian Postal Service years earlier for faking letters. Inside his novel sat a single chapter in the Jewish cemetery in Prague, in which 13 figures gather among the tombs to report on a plan for world conquest. It was fiction. He never claimed otherwise. But within 20 years, that one chapter was lifted out, reprinted on its own, and dressed up as a real report called The Rabbi's Speech. By 1893, newspapers were printing it as an authentic speech by an actual rabbi. Nothing in the words had changed, only the label on them. So who stitched a French satire and a German novel into a single document and gave it a Russian home? The trail runs to the Paris station of the Tsar's secret police, the Okhrana, and its chief there from 1884 to 1902, Pyotr Rashkovsky. The historian Norman Cohn placed the fabrication in Tsarist police circles in France around 1895. A 1997 study by the CIA's own historians documents Rashkovsky as a master of what we now call active measures, disinformation, staged plots, forged papers. That same study names him, in its own careful word, as allegedly responsible for the protocols. And that word matters. No document has ever proven a single author's hand. What is confirmed is the workshop, Tsarist Counterintelligence, in Paris. The name of the forger remains to this day attributed, not proven. Why forge such a thing at all? One thesis this investigation follows, and it is a thesis, not a settled fact, is that the document's first use was not against a people, but against a man. Around 1902, before Rasputin ever reached the palace, a French mystic named Philippe held the private trust of Tsar Nicholas and his wife. Norman Cohn records that both Rashkovsky and Sergei Nilus, 2 figures bound to the protocols, took part in the court intrigue that drove Philippe out. Whether the forgery itself was the weapon used to unseat that rival at court is the question the investigation tests. The intrigue is documented. The weapon is still the open question. The document reached the world through a man who believed every word of it. In 1905, a Russian mystic named Sergei Nilus printed the protocols as an appendix, tucked into the back of a book about the coming of the Antichrist. Nilus was not the forger. Cohn judged him a sincere believer, not a conscious deceiver, and that is exactly what made him dangerous. A liar can be caught in a lie. A true believer preaches. Nilus also told at least 3 different, contradicting stories about where the manuscript had come from, a fact the journalist Hermann Bernstein laid out side by side. A document with a real origin does not need 3 of them. For 100 years, one name has been attached to the forgery, Rachkovsky's. Follow that attribution back, and it rests on a single source, Princess Catherine Radziwill, who named him in a New York magazine in February of 1921. 19 years earlier, Radziwill had stood trial in Cape Town on 24 counts of fraud and forgery, convicted of forging the signature of Cecil Rhodes. The one witness who put a name to the forger was herself a convicted forger. It is the detail almost every retelling leaves out, and it is why the authorship still stays an open question. Then it crossed the ocean. In America, Henry Ford's own newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, ran the protocols and their themes for years, gathered into 4 volumes titled The International Jew. In Mein Kampf, published in 1925, Adolf Hitler praised Ford by name and kept his portrait in his office. In 1927, facing a lawsuit, Ford signed a public apology and shut the newspaper down. 11 years later, in 1938, he accepted the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest honor Nazi Germany could give a foreigner. The apology and the medal, 11 years apart. And it reached Germany, where Ford could no longer call it back. The German edition, Der Internationale Jude, printed in Leipzig from 1922, kept circulating long after Ford ordered it stopped. At the Nuremberg trials in 1946, Baldur von Schirach, who had led the Hitler Youth, pointed back to Ford's book as a shaping influence on a generation of German youth. Words printed in Michigan named aloud in a war crimes court. The exposure came early and more than once. In 1921, the Times of London printed the Joly parallels line by line. In the mid-1930s, a court in Bern, Switzerland, heard the evidence and ruled the protocols a forgery. So here's what the record confirms. The text is a fabrication, its words copied from Joly's satire and Goedsche's novel, assembled in Tsarist police circles in France, carried into the world by a believer, and spread across 2 continents by an industrialist and a regime. And here is what the record does not confirm, the single hand that first stitched it together. That name is still an open question. The forgery's power was never that it was true. Its power was the network that kept it moving. Every person in this story has a full episode of their own on this channel. This was the thread that connects them,